Welcome inside the Bridgestone Canadian Superbike Championship podcast, everybody. It is the round number 4 preview. Unfortunately, I'm right now dealing with some football things and scribbling all over pieces of paper. Not nearly enough information on those to actually make a game sound good between the Alouettes and the Toronto Argonauts. But I'm joined by Colin Fraser, who is not just a wonderful analyst and somebody who is into the nitty-gritty of all things Bridgestone CSBK. He also bought me new shoes this week. So that was a very nice moment that we had as we were voicing things in Belleville because I may or may not have been wandering around with shoes at the racetrack that had holes in them because I just hadn't had an opportunity to go shopping all that much. And so my CSBK dad took on the responsibility of going and getting me some shoes. Hello, Colin.
Well, I got to point out from the Bridgestone point of view, shoes are very important. Traction is everything, and we don't want you slip sliding around. That's risky. You're a busy guy. You have a lot of responsibility. So yeah, got to handle the traction element of things. And at Bridgestone, we take that very seriously. I'm inside the media trailer. I'm actually already at Atlantic Motorsport Park. So yeah, we're just getting underway. It's a local Society of ARL test day. You may hear the odd Ducati booming by in the background, and the whole gang is here getting ready.
Amazing. Yeah, I was going to say back in round 2, I guess it was in Grand Bend that I told you, and we were talking about ordering up some fresh Bridgestones for our bikes, that I said, hey, as soon as you order some new boots, I'll get some new ones. You're like, there's no need to have a correlation between those two things. But it turns out that I got my boots before we got ours. So it's all good. It's all good. We are obviously very excited about going to Atlantic Motorsport Park. I'm going to be out there a little bit later than usual because of some responsibilities. But the hope is that we are going to get this thing in without having crazy weather and everything else. Just set up the weekend for us as you are boots on the ground out there, Colin.
Well, we've got crazy weather coming. We expect really hard rain. I was discussing it with local fast guy Fraser and also Ben Young, our leading architect of speed here. And the question was, really how fast is the track with the changes, and also what will happen when we wash all the rubber off, which is likely to happen because we're near the coast and the ocean, and when you get a storm, it tends to be a big thing. So tomorrow morning, we have basically one practice session, then we get into qualifying. Last year, that's as far as we got, and we got into the 17s last year, which was a good start, and we expected a little bit more. This year, from what we understand, the pace is mid 18s. We expected the track to be a little bit faster, but it hasn't happened yet. But of course, the national guys have just been riding for 4 sessions so far today. So we really don't know what our potential is. Our last event at Edmonton on Friday morning, it was very fast, and we were expecting to be even faster in the afternoon, but the track actually got a little bit slick and people were being a little more careful. So we didn't maybe have that ultimate pace. We don't know at Shubenacadie because we missed some races because of COVID. And then, of course, last year we had the washout with the bridge washing out.
And the way that this track has essentially evolved in the past as weekends have gone on, for those that aren't familiar, was what?
Well, I guess the question is, does it get faster or slower? That's kind
Yeah.
of where you're headed. And our test sample is very much tweaked by the fact last year was the first year with Bridgestone. So every track we were going to was the first time with Bridgestone. And weirdly, we were at 2 different tracks 3 weeks ago, and both times those were new tracks for Bridgestone. So we're sort of completing the loop of learning about all the different racetracks. And our situation here is we expect the Bridgestones to be a little bit faster than the previous choice. And the track has some new paving and some changes, and there's some questions about a couple of the bumps and how the speed on the back straight, which we call the roller coaster, will be affected because it's not really a straightaway and it's very much a bravery oriented part of the racetrack. So confidence in the tire and knowledge of how the bike will behave, like to get the last little bit of lap time here on a 200 horsepower superbike is a very, very big commitment. So we'll wait and see what happens. I don't expect we'll have any problems with that, but ultimate pace is the unknown here. And we don't know if the track's faster. Right now, the guys don't think it is, but it looks like it should be. So yeah, it's a shot in the dark.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the weekend is presented by Pro Cycling Canadian Kawasaki, by the way, I should mention. And going back to Shubenacadie and being able to get on track, I think everyone is excited. But you mentioned someone who has a lot going on, and this is the inevitable first actual question when it comes to riders, which is Ben. And seeing him there and the fact that he has a ton of travel coming up as soon as this race is done, where is his head at?
Oh, I think its head's in a good place. I had some tea with the young family at lunchtime. It was nice to visit and caught up with a bunch of stuff. And he and Willie Vass, his tuner, will be in Japan in just a couple of days. Willie is not going there for specific responsibilities. Obviously, that team has technicians, but Willie is a good sounding board and knowledgeable. And I think we're all interested to see Willie will be meeting some of the people from the international BMW team, so building some relationships. And we're discussing, where Ben will be on the pecking order, and we expect him to be the third shift guy. So, Ben's concerned what his pace will be like. But the big stars that are there will probably ride first, people like Zarco. And Ben probably won't, at least initially, be out there. So he'll be out with the third string guys. So the expectations of pace are maybe a little bit less. And on top of that, we're trying to figure out, how we can get information back to Canada about how things are going. If there's a video we can get access to, is
Yeah.
Eurosport doing it? We don't have the answers. We're trying to work on that so we can tell the Canadian fans that there are ways of tracking Ben. But it's an 8-hour race. Right now, the weather looks like it's going to be bad, which is not unusual for that time of year in Japan. And Ben will be riding likely the third shift. But of course, if he rides well, that his shifting responsibility could change. And also, people get hurt, things go wrong, bikes get crashed. So it gets pretty complicated at Szoke in a big hurry.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that potentially have been, interested in the Bridgestone CSBK or maybe in what Ben Young has been doing, and whether it was Daytona or might be crash coursing in all things Suzuka, right, over the next week. But that's all coming on the heels of what our weekend is going to be out in Nova Scotia. The other thing I want to ask you about in terms of the Superbikes is, with Ben going through the last couple of rounds that he has, which was, I mean, to recap it, I guess, as succinctly as possible, essentially Grand Bend, it's Trevor Daley gets the victory, Sam Grant gets a victory. He goes in to Rad Torque and goes out on race one in Superbike on Saturday and lays down some really, really good times and gets pushed and finds a way. And then on Sunday, he ends up having that mistake, basically coming out of the last corner on the finish straight, and has Torrin Collins go ahead and get the victory, and Alex Dumas up there on the podium again. And there's some building momentum in the Dumas camp. And you mentioned the Ducati screaming around potentially in the background there with you. Ben, knowing that he maybe left a little bit on the table, and that Dumas, even though he wasn't around the first couple of rounds, has been building momentum in the last really couple of weeks. It's been a sprint all of a sudden to get up to speed. That does create an interesting challenge when we are going to this place, which, as you say, is so unique.
Well, it's an interesting situation with Dumas because I'm sure he's not happy with how things went in Edmonton, but 2 podiums in his first 2 rides on the Ducati after missing the initial races is a very, very strong
Yeah.
effort. And, he jokes at 21 years old, he's not washed up yet, but we have such a crazy youth movement going on. It's just remarkable what's happening in the series and how fast and consistent these young guys have become in such a short period of time. But nonetheless, Dumas has been strong. The bike is good. Scott Miller from Fast Company, who looks after that bike, has been going full tilt since Edmonton to get ready. They're much more prepared than they were. Vieira, who's one of the teammates for the Econolube team, he has all of his Ducatis here. And we had an interesting discussion about, the merits of the various Ducati V twins he's riding. But of course, the focus is on Dumas with that V4
Yeah.
Panigale, the Superbike, right? And this is a track Dumas has been fast at. That is a bike that should work very well here. It's almost kind of the opposite of the big bad BMW, right? The bomber. But Ben is the guy here, right? Ben is the guy who for a long time has been the pace setter. He had that race back in 18 when he got run into from behind and had to climb back up through the field and ended up winning on the last corner on the last lap after stringing a whole bunch of 18s together. 108s. So that was a remarkable feat that he accomplished and was the most impressive thing that's basically ever happened at this track. So, if Alex wants to go and take it away from his longtime rival Ben, it's going to be a real straight up fight. But what informs this is Ben Young has to get on a plane and go to Japan immediately. And there's a lot of responsibility there and expectation. And it's great to have those opportunities, but nobody else is worried about that. And, Ben is the guy to beat. That hasn't changed. And certainly this morning here, it looks like business as usual. And everybody is paying attention to Ben and what he's up to and his decisions. Got both his bikes. Everything seems to be working fine. They're definitely looking at some chassis things, and they're looking to take advantage of the new pavement and the changes to the track. And again, that all happened over the winter. We don't know how to read that, and there's all kinds of expectations, but none of them are solid.
If there's one thing that I do love about the Bridgestone Canadian Superbike Championship, it is that every round that we have gone to has had a different set of circumstances and variables and challenges, and having all of this being put on the table, I think in round four is tremendous theater for everyone who is interested in the series and who will be there actually on the ground and watching the races. Before we move on, because I do want to ask you some things about Elliot Vieira and those Ducatis in sport bike, but when we're talking about whether it's Torrin Collins out there in Edmonton in round number three, or Steven Nickerson and his incredible performances that we saw in round two in Grand Bend, the locals have been a huge part. Not that they're not always a part of the storyline when you have those kind of wild cards dropping in, but they've played major roles in major races so far throughout this season that have had influences. And of course, Trevor Daley dropping in Grand Bend as well. I don't want to pass by him because he did go on and get a victory and do the double on that Sunday with Sport and Super. But when we're talking about really talented, fast people, I can't help but bring up John Fraser because you've mentioned him multiple times throughout our preview that's up on YouTube and just in conversation about what has happened in the past. And there's obviously that connection to the Dumas camp as well.
Well, there's a lot of interesting things going on with Fraser. He's 19 years old. He's a young guy. He showed pace here. He was battling with Dumas and Young last year in qualifying and throwing down some really good times. I think he is aware of what's possible. He's expecting more than a podium, I think. I talked to him a little bit this morning. He is more relaxed in terms of growing into his abilities, I think, but a little stressed that the expectations are high, particularly from the locals. And Collins was not well known to us going into Edmonton. So it was exciting to play that game with him and see what he could do. Fraser's in a different position. Fraser is known to us. When we were here a year ago, we were heavily predicting he was at the minimum on the podium and possibly a spoiler for Dumas to help push Young back down in the points. And of course, none of that happened. Those races did not occur. So Fraser's coming out party was arguably delayed at least a year. Now, what's interesting about that is, we can't say that Trevor Daley had a coming out party, but several very good riders have made their next big steps. There are some other guys, who are overdue for those next steps, and we reach out to Sportbike Seeir, rookie pro, reigning champion in two amateur classes. We're expecting something out of him. And Philip the Beast is another one, and we're working through what is the nickname for Phil. We're not sure about that. We've had a bunch of them, but that's the one Phil likes. I asked him today, and he said he'd prefer we didn't freestyle too much on the nicknames, although there are so many good ones.
I was going to say I'm surprised that he's against any nicknames. I thought he would just say yes to all of them.
Well, I think that's what happens when you start getting recognized, right? You start getting a little more fussy about the details. But anyway, there are several guys who might break out sooner than Fraser, but it's unfortunate for Fraser that he's had a solid year of waiting for that Saturday or Sunday or both that we thought would be expected and typical of what he's able to do. And what's interesting too is before he had an ex-Trevor Daley Suzuki, which was a good bike and he rode it well, but now he's on a better motorcycle and they are working through the electronics. And I was talking to his dad about analyzing data, which is not something that they were used to doing. And his dad was joking, about old technology and how he's a flat slide carb guy, which I get called sometimes too. Old technology carburetors, don't have wet hands from gasoline much anymore with fuel injection. But yeah, it's a modern bike. It's a bike Dumas rode here with considerable success. So I mean, you hate to put the pressure on a young guy, but that's where Fraser is square in the crosshairs of giant expectations, not just from the locals, but from the national series, because we know him. He raced most of last year with us, and he was so fast here a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn our attention here towards sport bike. And the first thing I do want to ask you, and for anybody who's watching this on the YouTube, when you mentioned that all of Elliot Vieira's Ducatis are there, I put my arms up. That wasn't sarcastically me being like, hey, they've all made it. The fact is that he's gone through a bunch of adversity, some of it self-inflicted throughout this season, where he's crashed things and he's damaged things and he's had to try and get things put back together in order to actually get back up to speed at various places throughout the last couple of rounds. Where do you think he is at going into this round? Because having all of those, I do wonder whether or not, in a strange sideways manner, there's almost some major learning that has come from some of these mistakes that have been made by Elliott over the last while.
Well, one of the problems in motorcycle racing when you're climbing the ladder is the expectation, and a journalist in the States called John Ulrich, who also runs a team, has written extensively over the years about this, that we can't teach you how to be fast. We can teach you most of the rest of it. So the consistency, the not making mistakes, the brain farts, whatever you want to call it, that we can work at that with you. You see it in MotoGP all the time now because the margins are so small, figuring out how to get in front of what's going on in your head and not make mistakes. And very easy for you and I on a Thursday afternoon to have this conversation. Really fun riding a powerful motorcycle on a twisty, bumpy racetrack consistently amongst other very talented young racers. So yeah, a lot of variables there, and I feel bad for Elliott in a number of ways, and he is generally very well liked. But Sebastian Tremblay had a bad shoulder 3 weeks ago in Edmonton, and he was not contending. So there was a lot of opportunity there. John Lang did better. Elliott didn't because he had a fall on Sunday. So Elliott was the guy we were looking to jump on a lot of those points. And instead, Tremblay has more than a race in hand, and we're halfway through the championship. So, we talk about Tremblay and his consistency and his good judgment. He hasn't won much here. He's been the recipient of some bizarre activities, which is kind of the unfortunate end of Seb, that he's the target the way Ben Young is. And I compare them a lot on our TSN broadcast. But, Elliott is the official opposition of Sebastian, and Sebastian's representing Suzuki. Elliott's representing Ducati. They're both very fast. Next up is Mosport, where the two of them had tremendous battles last year. But Elliott's trying to chip away for credibility. He's probably not running for a championship because Seb has probably done most of the heavy lifting, even though he was in conservation mode back when we were in Edmonton.
Yeah, we've already reached that point as we enter round number 4 here of looking big picture championship stuff of, okay, who has done enough in order to get themselves in the best possible situation. Obviously, Tremblay has done that for the large part in Sportbike. If anybody's going to give a charge to Sebastian Tremblay starting now, moving forward, who we know is going to be there consistently and placing on podiums and challenging him outside of Elliott Vieira, who could that person be in your opinion?
Well, I think I'd like to start with John Lang, and he had a good time at Edmonton, but I'm going to start with Maverick Seeir because he got his first podium. He's climbing the ladder. He's got better equipment. He's got a bike, I think, that can win. On Sunday at Edmonton, he had it somewhat sorted and was starting to look like his old self. And, learning to ride a Ducati is not nothing. It is quite a bit different. So that was very encouraging. And for a while, we've been saying Seir's going to win a race, and we have half a season to go. And maybe you would say Mosport's the most obvious place, but I like Seir's a young guy who doesn't seem intimidated. And, a lot of people are worried about this track and just getting some points and not crashing or not having any drama. And I don't think that's how Seir's going into this. I think Seir's, it's another race. It's another chance. He was in front of Tremblay last time, and I expect Seb to be back at the front. But I have this hunch that, for a while, Seir has been showing more and more pace. He led at Grand Bend. He had some problems in Edmonton, but his Sunday pace was good. So as much as I just kind of skipped over Kawasaki and John Lang, I just have a sense of Seir and his willingness to engage where some of the riders are a little more careful here.
This is the peak of the Bridgestone Canadian Superbike Championship as we head into the final lap. The white flag comes out.
1 lap to go.
The white flag flies.
It's our last lap flag.
It's the white flag, the final lap.
Last lap flag, 1 to go.
All right, it is our white flag, 1 to go. What is the one last thought that you have going into round number 4 in Shubenacadie?
Well, I'd like to talk about Jordan Szoke because he has an incredible record here. It's his first ever Superbike race was here. And by the way, this is the 50th anniversary of this place as a racetrack. It debuted as a Formula Atlantic venue back in 1974. And a very famous man named Villeneuve won that race. But anyway, to skip back, Szoke has been coming forward. Edmonton was another, in my opinion, significant step for his speed and consistency. And I don't think anybody was betting that Jordan would come as far back as he has from the injuries that made him sit it out 2 years ago. And Jordan was right there in Edmonton. And this is a place where he has so much experience, and it really, really counts here because it is such a difficult racetrack. Next up is Canadian Tire Motorsport Park, and he is amazing there and has frequently won there when he shouldn't. So I think the series is excited about the notion that maybe Jordan could win another race, and his hit rate is remarkable for a guy who's been in so many many races. I think it's around 50% of the races he's been in, he's won. So as much as there's lots of other people like Sam Garant, who it would be nice to talk about, I think Jordan's coming, a little bit like Seeir. He's not making excuses. He's trying to figure it out. And there's rumors that maybe somebody named Collins will be his teammate at Mosport. So we'll see what happens.
Would be intriguing, no doubt. And also, I would love to be able to see Jordan Szoke push the pace here, because I think we can all agree, not just because this weekend is presented by Pro Cycle and Canadian Kawasaki, but this series is better when Jordan Szoke is pushing everyone that's around him, right? Like when you get that depth of talent in the field, and you end up having Sam Garant battling alongside Szoke, Dave McKay maybe mixing it up, trying to get in there in that 3, 4, 5, 6 spot like he's consistently been throughout this season. And then we'll see what happens at the top step throughout this entire crazy round number 4. It is, of course, Atlantic Motorsport Park, and it is coming up tomorrow, Friday. It is July 12th through the 14th out there, Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia. Colin, I miss you. Thank you for the shoes. I'm looking forward to seeing you, and maybe we'll do another one of these while I'm stuck in the province of Ontario in the next couple of days before I get out there, okay?
Thank you.